We're going to continue on our study on Revelation, but before we do that, we're going to read a chapter out of Psalm like what we have been doing. We're going to read Psalm 15. The note here says, in my Bible says, description of a citizen of Zion, and a psalm of David. O Lord, who may abide in thy tent, who may dwell on thy holy hill? He who walks with integrity and works righteousness and speaks truth in his heart. He does not slander with his tongue, nor does evil to his neighbor, nor takes up a reproach against his friend, in whose eyes a reprobate is despised, but who honors those who fear the Lord. He swears to his own hurt and does not change. He does not put out his money at interest, nor does he take a bribe against the innocent. He who does these things will never be shaken. So last week, if you remember, Psalm 14 talked about the fool, right? The fool says in his heart there is no God, and this week talks about the psalm talked about what it takes to be righteous or to be a servant of God. So, all right. With that, we'll get back to Revelation here. We started in now on dealing with the symbols that are used in Revelation, and we've talked about some of the different things that are used. Colors, elements in the world, storms, those kind of things. And then, of course, last week we got into pretty deep on numbers and what those numbers represent, which numbers are good, which numbers are bad, what they mean. Some of the cause for confusion, you might say, with things, like when it says 10 or 1,000, what that means, and what people who try to attach literal time periods to that versus figurative. And then 6 and 666 and those kind of things, what that actually means. Not necessarily that it's pointing out one specific individual, but that it's referring to people or humanity and certain aspects of that. And we'll get more into that later, but we kind of covered that it's not, I don't think it's a specific person that's being referred to in those cases. So anyway, we covered up through why use symbols. We covered the numbers, the colors. And if we can go down on this tab, PDF, down to where it talks about the contrasting. We also mentioned that. I think it's down one more yet. There we go. So this is an example of some of the opposites that are contrasted in Revelation. And we'll see that play out more as we go through these symbols and also when we actually get into the text. So God and the dragon, Christ and the beast, Holy Spirit, false prophet, the radiant woman, the harlot, the seal of God versus those that have the seal of the beast, two-edged sword versus the tongue-speaking blasphemies, and New Jerusalem, Babylon. Once again, maybe you don't see these exactly the way that the person who came up with this slide does, and there's others in there, but just an example of things that are in there that you can think about as we go through this, and you can see the contrast, which is also a big part of the message that's being revealed. So we want to know that. Okay, so where we were ending up is to start talking about the enemies of the people of God and the symbols used to represent them in the Revelation. Once again, we talked about the different interpretations that people have of Revelation. You remember what those are? Some different ways that people might try to interpret Revelation? Anybody? You don't have to give like the exact scholarly term for it or anything, just different ways some people would say that, as an example, it's all already happened, right? And that would be called preterist, whatever. So that's one way of interpreting it. Some other people might try to say that very little of it's happened, that it's all happening in the future, and that's another way. And then there's people who would say it goes across history, and is being done throughout. So there's different ways of looking at it. And so I only say that because, as you know by now, the way that I view it and what we're going to look at is basically that these things have happened, that they were to happen soon based off of what John said, And so that's where a lot of the symbology or symbols will come from. So the enemies were enemies of the church in John's day. And that's what we're looking at. So they faced a terrible enemy. What was that enemy? Besides the devil, we know that. Rome, right? And Rome actually had kind of two different aspects. You know, there was, and you'll see this as we go through these symbols, but there was the Roman government, basically, you know, just like what the United States has a government, countries have government. There was the Roman government, and then there was a religious part to Rome. And we talked about that, the Caesars, and then there were Caesars that wanted to be worshipped as gods, and then there were Caesars that didn't want to be worshipped as gods. It kind of went back and forth. But there was this, the religion of Rome is, when it was being used as Caesar worship, was certainly an issue for the Christians, right?
Well, it's not just even the Caesar worship, because the duality of Roman existence, you had the civil authorities, which is, you've accurately stated there. The other is the religious authorities, which were not necessarily devoted just to Caesar worship.
Right, yeah, there was, well, when we talked about this, it wasn't just Caesar worship, but when any religion to be accepted had to meet certain tests. And if it was considered to be, not opposite of Pax Romana, if it was going to cause problems, then they had a problem with it.
Which is why the Roman government loved to ban small groups, because they deemed them, you know, rebellious against Roman government.
Right.
That's my parents today.
Yeah. So
the Lord's Supper was a big issue.
Right. That's what you.
There's a letter that shows they would come in and break up the Lord's Supper because they were considered clubs.
Which is kind of ironic, because these, as far as Roman worship, was full of cults. Like they had that. It was the cults were what you had cults that did promote Caesar worship, and then you had cults that didn't promote Caesar worship. So they had cults, but they didn't like groups that broke off from that, or that had, like I said, we went through those tests. If they didn't meet those tests, then it was a problem for the Roman government. So yeah, so even if it wasn't Caesar worship, there could be problems even, but that's when the huge persecution, I think, mostly hit, was when you had Caesar, the Caesar wanted to be worshipped as a god. But certainly there were problems at other times as well. Okay, so the first enemy we are going to discuss is the devil. So what images do you know, before we even talk about it, or do you remember, what images are used to portray the devil in Revelation? Because there actually aren't that many, as far as I'm aware.
Serpent and dragon.
Serpent and dragon. Anything else?
Satan was released.
He's released, yeah, well, he's as a dragon there again. I don't actually have anything else listed for here, but I do think there's another reference, although it's not a symbol, where it talks about kind of a reference to what Jesus said about Satan falling and the stars and half of them falling with him, or I forget the numbers, but that symbology is also used in Revelation at a point, although I guess there's not really a symbol attached to the devil at that stage, just he fell. Okay, so really just a couple things. Let's go to chapter 12. I may not have given you guys the scripture. Did I give you a scripture in 12 for right now? 12, 1 through 10. 13, 1 through, okay, yeah, I didn't give you 12 then. So in 12, starting verse 3, it just says, "And another sign appeared in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon having 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads were 7 diadems, and his tail swept away a third of the stars of heaven, and threw them to the earth. And the dragon stood before the woman who was about to give birth, so that when she gave birth he might devour her child." So there's the dragon. Then in 20 and 2, that one I think I did give you guys.
Then I saw an angel coming down from heaven. Oh, and he sees the dragon, the
You
ancient
can read
serpent.
1, 2 if you want. That's okay.
And he sees the dragon, the ancient serpent, who is the devil and Satan, and bound him for 1,000 years.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about this passage last week. 1,000 years doesn't necessarily mean a literal. In fact, it doesn't mean a literal 1,000 years. It's more symbolic. But it says here the dragon, the serpent of old, and it tells us who that is: devil and Satan, right? So that's the way that the devil is portrayed. But now we're going to get into the part that where there's more debate as to what's being talked about. And that is the devil gives power to a beast. And this beast is referred to as the beast from the sea beast, or the first beast, a number of terms used for that. And it's found in Revelation 13, 1 through 10. That's what Dave was just saying. So one of you guys want to read 13, 1 through 10?
And I saw a beast rising out of the sea, with 10 horns and 7 heads, and 10 diadems on its horns, and blasphemous names on its heads. And the beast that I saw was like a leopard. Its feet were like a bear's, and its mouth was like a lion's mouth. And to it the dragon gave his power and his throne and his great authority. One of the heads seemed to have a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed. And the whole earth marveled at the following as they followed the beast. And they worshiped the dragon, and he had given his authority to the beast, and they worshiped the beast, saying, "Who is like the beast? Who can fight against it?" And the beast was given a mouth uttering haughty and blasphemous words, and was allowed to exercise authority for 42 months. It opened its mouth to utter blasphemies against God, blaspheming his name and his dwelling, that is, those who dwell in heaven. Also, it was allowed to make war on the saints to conquer them. The authority was given it over every tribe and people and language and nation. And all who dwell on the earth will worship it. Everyone whose name has not been written before the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb was slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is to be taken captive, to captivity he goes. If anyone is to be slain with the sword he must be slain. And I think that's it. Oh, here is the call for the endurance of the faith and of the saints.
All right, thanks, Dave. So first off, just to see who was paying attention last week and remembers, there was a part in here that talks about, and there was given to him a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies, and authority to act for 42 months was given to him. So what does that mean? That authority was given to him for 42 months.
I know it was in that table we were looking at.
So 42 months, derivative of what? Or can you come to? Three and a half years, right? So what's 3.5? Half of 7. It means that it's not a perfect, complete. It's not gonna last. It's a partial. He's given the authority. He doesn't have the authority. Not complete. So it's not something like where this beast can overcome God. Basically, it's limited. Okay, so that's the first point to note. So what is the sea? It says, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea. What is this sea that the beast comes up out of?
It's basically coming up out of humanity.
As I told you, I'm using some commentaries from Hines, which Elton, you're familiar with because you talked about that. That's the Gospel Advocate one. And there's this one from McGuigan, also a couple others. But both Hines and McGuigan go to chapter 17, because in 17 we get more explanation about what these things are. And they both indicate that the sea stands for nations and people in troubled and disturbed times. You know, the sea, you get troubled and disturbed, you know what it looks like when it's stormy out. Hines says the beast is a symbol of a kingdom that would rise when the people would be disturbed like the waves of the sea. McGuigan uses Isaiah 57:20 to show the example of the symbolism. I think you guys have that one ready to read.
What was it again?
Isaiah 57:20.
But the wicked are like the tossing sea and cannot be quiet, for its waters tossed up mire and dirt.
Okay, so there you can kind of see the symbolism there. And then also Daniel 7:2-3, but we're not going to read that just yet. We'll get to that in just a minute. We're actually probably going to read a little bit more of that, but he uses that to talk about the symbolism here with the beast as well. Okay, so what are the 7 heads that we see here? I'm asking you guys this before we read, so I don't necessarily expect it, you know. But if anybody knows, what are the 7 heads?
Nations?
Not nations.
Churches? No, I know they're not churches, sorry, I don't.
All right, so back in 17:7-10, which is why you guys haven't gotten there because we haven't read these yet. 7-10, it says, and the angel said to me, why do you wonder? I shall tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. The beast that you saw was and is not, and is about to come up out of the abyss and to go to destruction. And those who dwell on the earth will wonder, whose name has not been written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast, that he was and is not and will come. Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits, and they are 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come, and when he comes, he must remain a little while. Now then, we can get into a lot of detail on this part, but I don't want to do that here. We might get into it a little bit more when we actually are going through verse by verse, but at this juncture, I don't want to say, well, which king is this pointing to, or Caesar, or whatever. We're not going to go there. But what are the 7 mountains or 7 hills?
The 7 hills of Rome.
Right. Everybody knows that, or did know that. Maybe not everybody knows it today. But I have a slide up for them to put up that shows the 7 hills. Dave, you got that?
What is it in?
I think it would just be called Revelation 7 Hills. Maybe? Yeah, Rome, 7 hills. Yeah, sorry, missed Rome there. So there's a map that shows the 7 hills. I highlighted them so you can see them. So reference to Rome. And that would, like I said, wouldn't have been hidden, like Rome knew that. So it's not like they're trying to hide that they're talking about Rome.
Even in the histories, it's written that way.
Right. So that's what it's referring to, the beast, Rome, right? What are the 10 horns wearing crowns? Well, and actually, before we go there, let me go back a little bit. Why is it referring to Rome? Well, 7 hills on which Rome was built, and 7 kings or emperors. Upon these heads are the name of blasphemy. The Roman emperors, some of them, like we talked about, claimed divinity and wore those claims on their head. Once again, just more emphasis on what's going on with Rome there. Okay, so now, what are the 10 horns wearing crowns? And I don't think I gave this for you guys to read, but verse 12, and the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. These have one purpose, and they give their power and authority to the beast. So what are they? I think that they would be referring to Rome's allies who eventually are going to turn on Rome. They haven't yet, but they eventually are going to. Okay, we also see that the beast is pictured as a leopard, a bear, and a lion all rolled up in one. These pictures are used in Daniel 7 to represent the empires of Babylon, Medo-Persia, Medo-Persia, however you pronounce that, and Greece. So what would a beast of, well, actually, let's read it before I ask the question. All right, so we'll go to Daniel 7, and I'll read this because, like I told Dave, we're going to read a little bit more than what I had given you. So let's start in verse 1. In the first year of Belshazzar, king of Babylon, Daniel saw a dream and visions in his mind as he lay on his bed. Then he wrote the dream down and related the following summary of it. Daniel said, I was looking in my vision at night, and behold, the four winds of heaven were stirring up the great sea, and four great beasts were coming up from the sea, different from one another. So, sea, we talked about that, right? What's happening? The nations, troubled times. The first was like a lion and had the wings of an eagle. I kept looking until its wings were plucked, and it was lifted up from the ground and made to stand on 2 feet like a man. A human mind also was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second one, resembling a bear, and it was raised up on one side, and 3 ribs were in its mouth between its teeth. And thus they said to it, Arise, devour much meat. After this I kept looking, and behold, another one, like a leopard, which had on its back 4 wings of a bird. The beast also had 4 heads, and dominion was given to it. And can you try to picture these things? That's what kind of the images that we're talking about, like what this draws to mind here. After this, I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a 4th beast, dreadful and terrifying, and extremely strong, and it had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet, and it was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. While I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. Okay, and then let's drop down to 15, where the vision's interpreted. As for me, Daniel, my spirit was distressed within me, and the visions in my mind kept alarming me. I approached one of those who were standing by and began asking him the exact meaning of all this. So he told me and made known to me the interpretation of these things. These great beasts, which are 4 in number, are 4 kings which will arise from the earth. But the saints of the highest one will receive the kingdom and possess the kingdom forever, for all ages to come. Then I desired to know the exact meaning of the 4th beast, which was different from all the others, exceedingly dreadful, with its teeth of iron and its claws of bronze, and which devoured, crushed, and trampled down the remainder with its feet. And the meaning of the 10 horns that were on its head, and the other horn which came up, and before which 3 of them fell, namely that horn which had eyes and a mouth uttering great boasts, and which was larger in appearance than its associates. I kept looking, and that horn was waging war with the saints and overpowering them, until the Ancient of Days came, and judgment was passed in favor of the saints of the highest one, and the time arrived when the saints took possession of the kingdom. All right, so I think I have a slide of beasts that we can put up. Yeah, Revelation beasts. Yep, there you go. It's coming, buffering. Apparently, there we go. And this is also, actually go down one, I think. Go down to the second page on this. No, I'm too early. Go back up. All right. All right, so this is actually going back to, remember we talked about the metals. We talked about that, but this kind of follows the same pattern. Lion, bear, leopard, sea beast. And when I read the part where the vision's interpreted, I don't know about you, but I see in Revelation a very similar thing here, right? Isn't that what we see? So what's going to happen? The beast is Rome, and it's waging war against the saints, right? And it's going to have power for a while, a little while, not forever. It's going to have power over the saints for a little while. Now I'll ask my question, even though I just gave you the answer. What would the beast of all of them into one represent? Right there, right? Rome. And it represents Rome's political and military power. So that's what we're seeing. And so you can go back to Daniel and see this vision now in Revelation as well. That it's when Daniel was prophesying, it wasn't about to happen. Now here, the Revelation says things to come shortly, right? Things to happen soon. All right, so the devil uses Rome to persecute God's people. But what we see over and over again throughout Revelation is that God's people will overcome. And there is a point at which Rome will be destroyed and the devil will be completely bound as to being able to use Rome to hurt the church. That's a real quick summary of it, but that's what we see over and over again. We also see that the beast is worshipped. And as we were just discussing, this is the cause of much conflict between Rome and the church at the time that John was given, I shouldn't say wrote, he was given the revelation. He did write it then, but he was given the revelation, and some of the emperors started claiming to be God and demanded to be worshipped as such, as we talked about. So not all, but some of them did. Okay, so that's the first beast. Any questions or comments on that? Like I said, we'll hit it a little bit more when we go through, but any questions or comments? Because, of course, a lot of people don't see it that way, right? They think of it as something going on today or in the future and might point to it being something else. But 17 tells you pretty clearly it's referring to Rome. And it's not referring to Rome arising sometime in the future. It's talking about something that was going to happen fairly close to when this was being written. All right, so anyway, I'll stop talking for a minute in case somebody does have a comment or a question. All right, well then, let's go on to the second beast that is talked about here. There's the beast from the earth, and that's in Revelation 13, 11 through 18, if you guys want to read that.
Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had two horns like lambs and spoke like dragon. It exercised all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wounds was healed. It performs great signs, making fire come down from heaven, earth, from in front of people. By the signs it is allowed to work in its presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword, yet lived. And it was allowed to give the breath to the image of the beast, so the image of the beast might speak and might cause those who not worship the image of the beast to be slain. It also causes both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead. So no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark that is the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number of man, and its number is 666.
All right, so once again, we hit those numbers that we talked about last week, right? Right off the bat here, its number is 666, and we talked about, it says number of a man, but remember, I don't know why McGuigan thought I would know this. I certainly didn't know it without reading it, but in Greek, there's no prepositions, so this could have been translated, it is man's number, not the number of a man. And that causes some problems with the way it's interpreted, because people think that it's referring to a specific person when it says a number of a man versus it's man's number. But anyway, what does 666 mean? It means if you take 7 is perfection, 6 is not, and it's 666, it's emphasizing it's man, it's not God. It's not, there's something wrong with it. In other words, I don't know how to emphasize that enough, but it's got a problem. So that's what this is talking about. Also, a lot of times we get into this, well, what's the mark that people are going to receive, right? The mark of the beast. Is it really talking about a mark? I don't think so. I think it's talking about, if you go back to that contrast that we put up there, the seal of those who are sealed by God, those who have the seal of the beast, right? Contrast those two things. So I'm not looking for they're going to give us all microchips and put it in our hand or whatever, and that's the mark of the beast, or that kind of a thing as far as what is happening here. This is talking about those who are God's versus those who are evil, who are doing wrong. And so that's what I think there. But the beast looks like a lamb but speaks like a dragon. Now, what would a lamb represent to Christians? Religion, right? What's Jesus? The Lamb of God, right? Okay, so we're talking about religion here, right? But it speaks like a dragon. So remember a wolf in sheep's clothing kind of thing, right? It's a lamb, has the appearance of religion or of good maybe, but what's it speak like? The dragon. What's the dragon represent?
Evil.
Devil, right? Satan, evil, yes. Okay, so right away, we're talking about religion, and it's a false religion. So the work of the beast is to enforce the worship of the first beast. Okay, so here we're talking religious Rome is enforcing the worship of what?
Of the civil government of Rome.
Of the empire worship of Rome, the false religion. History informs us of something called the Roman, here again I don't know how to pronounce this, Concilia. It's a bureaucracy of the empire that enforced worship of images of the Roman emperors. So you have the religious section, the cults, the section enforcing worship of the political and Rome. So those of us lucky enough to have been born and live in modern America probably don't appreciate the problem that state-run religion has caused for the church and for people throughout history. Why was America founded? What was a central driving force of that? Religious freedom, right? The Pilgrims came across. They didn't want to be forced to have a state religion. They wanted to worship the way that they wanted to. They were in search of a place where they could be free from the Church of England, right? This is, like I said, we may not be as familiar with it today here in America, but there certainly are countries where you can't be a Christian, not openly. Places in the Middle East, Africa. Geographically, most of the world is that way. Yeah, China. So that it certainly is still true today that there are governments that are interfering with the spread of Christianity and the practice of Christianity. It's closer to home than we might think. We talk about how we don't really know what persecution is here, and I think that's still true. But I know there's people in Canada that are getting arrested for practicing Christianity or for saying something that's common sense when you're talking about what's coming from the Bible. So it may be coming our way sooner than we think. And it has crept in to some degree, but at least not to the point of people being killed by the government that I'm aware of at this point, but we will see. The point that we want to emphasize is that these beasts are Rome and dealing with Rome. And it pretty clearly states it. I don't know how you get something else out of it whenever you go to 17 and it talks about the 7 hills and these things. All right, so it's important to remember as you go through Revelation that Rome is pictured as 2 beasts. The first is the sea beast that represents the political and military power of Rome. The second is the earth beast that represents the religion of Rome. And the religion of Rome was idolatrous, man-made, false religion. I mean, it doesn't matter the differences between it and the worship of Baal or whatever it was. I mean, it's still a false religion, yeah. Okay, so what else is Rome as an enemy of God's people pictured as? Well, in 17 and 18, we also see the great harlot. We read some of that passage, the harlot riding on the beast, and Babylon the Great. These images are to represent that Rome is a great economic power that controls trade and commerce. Every king, country, nation wanted to do business with Rome. Rome was the economic power of the day. Kind of like the United States has been the economic power of the world for a while now. I don't know exactly how long. But Rome is powerful, and the harlot is powerful. She rides on top of the beast. And in chapter 17 and 18, verse 18, it says, and the woman whom you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. Who reigned over the kings of the earth at that point? Rome. So what would the Christians of John's day have thought of whenever he says the king, the great city that reigns over the kings of the earth?
America.
Not America. Rome, right? So she's seductive, she's adorned like a harlot, and all the merchants of the world desire her. What does that mean? Why would they desire her?
Because she's got money.
Yep, that's where the money is. They want to do business with Rome because it was the economic engine of the world. And God says that she is guilty of persecuting his people and is doomed. One of you guys want to read 18, 20, and 21?
Rejoice, O here, O heaven, and your saints and your apostles and prophets, for God has given you judgment for you against her. Then the mighty angel took up a stone, like a great millstone, and threw it into the sea, saying, so will Babylon, the great city, will be thrown down with violence and be found no more.
All right, so pretty final judgment there, right? It's going to be done. So if you remember the different ways that Revelation is interpreted, some would hold out that the prophecy of the persecution has been recurring throughout history, right? Over and over again. I don't think that that's the case. I think that it's specific to the time with Rome here. But can you see it happening throughout history over and over again? Can we see the same kind of thing? Yes. Certainly, right? As I just mentioned, there's governments today that outlaw Christianity and control what people are allowed to practice in their religion. There are Christians being killed in countries for being Christian. So it's still happening today. It's not something that's ever going to end. It's just that Rome, I think the prophecies are specific to Rome, and that was going to be done away with. And Rome was no longer going to be able to do what it was doing there. And of course, as I mentioned, religious persecution played a role in the founding of America. So don't you think that God knew what he was prophesying to the Christians of John's day would also be applicable until the end of time?
Absolutely.
Of course he did. And that's why it makes sense for him to write it, to reveal it the way he did, so that we can get that application out of it and that we can see that. All right. We got about 2 minutes, and we're at the end of that. Does anybody have any more? I didn't ask for questions or comments about the second beast or anything that we talked about here. Like I said, this lesson was talking about the enemies of the church that were in John's day. And of course, the main one is still around, the devil. And then you had the use of the Roman, both political and religious Rome, and how that was going to be done, how that was going to persecute the Christians. And like I said, I think it was specific to that, but I think we can see that we can apply that throughout time here until Jesus comes back.
And that's kind of where we end up with all these other interpretations, because people keep wondering, but wait, I see this.
Right, you can see it happening. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yes, it is happening, but the book of the Revelation is about what's happening to then.
Right then, yeah. Or not right then, but shortly thereafter or in that period of time. Exactly. So it's specific to what's happening to them. But of course, what's the phrase? I don't even remember. Do people ever change? Do things ever change? No. Same thing happens over and over again, right? History repeats itself. So of course we're going to see the same thing happening, again and again, as far as people have want power. People don't want to listen to God. We see that over and over again, and it's going to continue to happen. But the prophecies that are here are specific to Rome. I feel pretty confident saying that. So anyway, next week we'll pick up with some symbols for God's people. We talked about enemies this week. We'll talk about God's people next week. And we'll be back in about 15 minutes for worship.